Oh.
Hi!
We are super excited to be here. My name is Faith Winter. I am the National Training Director for Vote Run Lead and a State Senator in Colorado. And we are super excited to have you all here with us today. This is Sheena Kadi. She is the awesome Deputy Director for One Colorado, which is the equality group in Colorado. But before that, she was my campaign manager in the last cycle, and we won one of the most competitive legislative races in the country together, and we had fun doing it and treated our employees well, had more volunteers than any other competitive race in Colorado, and we're going to talk to you about how we did that because it's all about the magic of the campaign team. So we are with Vote Run Lead right now, and on the slides. And we train women to run for office and win. And so it is not just me that won. We have a lot of women all over the country, with women serving in Congress, state houses, city councils, and school boards all over the country, and we believe in you. We are the largest and most diverse women's training organization. Over half the women, nearly 60% of the women we train are women of color. And you are participating in the largest campaign training that any organization has launched this year. Just this last May, we trained 1,500 women in one day to run for office. So go online, check out the other trainings we have, and we're super excited to be here. We are also nonpartisan because we put women first and politics second, so we believe in you and your leadership, and are excited that you're here. So 70% of our first-time candidates win. We have an ambitious goal of training 30,000 women to run by 2020. So if you like this webinar today, invite your friends to sign up and join Vote Run Lead. Join our squad. We were one of the first organizations that actually brought the squad, the national squad, together last year at our town hall. The original picture that AOC tweeted out with her and Rashida and Ilhan in the said squad was at our town hall, and Ilhan's one of our amazing alumni. So we join our squad. And then, of course, get social. We are online with you today, and we want you to tweet about your experience. We want you to Facebook about your experience. We want you to Instagram about your experience. But more importantly, the most important part of this slide is to join our alumni group. We have nearly 2,000 women in our alumni group. It is a community of women helping women win. And so join that group. You are now an official part of our family, and are super excited to be here. Excellent. All right. And as I said, I'm a state senator, but I've been training women to run for office for 15 years. I've run and won 5 campaigns myself, and I'll let Sheena tell you a little bit more about her background.
Hey everyone, as Faith said, my name is Sheena Kadi. I'm currently the Deputy Director at One Colorado, which is Colorado's largest advocacy organization for LGBTQ Coloradans and their families. Right before that, I had the pleasure of managing this one's race for state senate. It was the DLCC's #1 targeted race in the country. No pressure. For the last 15 years, I've split my time pretty evenly between working directly for candidates, helping to elect women, people of color, and those that identify as LGBTQ on races big and small, all the way from school board up to 3 presidential elections. I've also spent my time working on policy and legislation that would also help to protect and support women, people of color, and those that identify as LGBTQ.
And she isn't endorsing the presidential primary, but you have worked on 2 of their campaigns.
Well, technically 3. So I did work for Senator Cory Booker on his first Senate race in New Jersey. I did work for Vice President Joe Biden on both of his and Barack Obama's presidential campaigns, and had the pleasure of getting to know Mayor Pete Buttigieg during my time working in Indiana.
Yeah, so very exciting. She's the best, and definitely use her as a resource. She is a nationally certified trainer for Vote Run Lead. We've certified over 100 trainers all over the country with a wide array of experiences. They are part of the alumni group, and so they are there to support you and help you and answer questions. So definitely take advantage of our amazing national trainers. All right, this is interactive. You got an email. And so we want you to pull out your self-assessment worksheet that was in your email. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. We will verbally go through the questions, and you can just use a piece of paper and a pen, whatever is easier. Because ultimately, building a good campaign starts with you as a candidate and your self-assessment.
No. That's right.
All right, so we're going to start with the self-assessment, and we'll talk a little bit about how that played into our relationship and our success. So the first is, what are your strengths? What are you really good at in a campaign setting? I kick ass at knocking doors. I love knocking doors. So for example, on my self-assessment is, I put down that I'm really good at knocking doors, and I like knocking doors. Not all candidates like knocking doors. Also, I want to point out that we have a chat going on as well. So feel free to share your strengths in that chat and get to know one another. Also, our awesome program manager, Star Haas, is in this chat. So she'll be collecting questions for Sheena and I to answer throughout and at the end. So if we're not hitting one of your questions, let Star know, but go ahead and share some of your strengths in the chat. And we'll give you a second to fill that out. And then the next question is, what are some of your weaknesses when you think of campaigns? So for example, I am awful, just horrendous at spelling. In fact, yesterday, just yesterday, I did a Facebook post. Sheena still has access to my Facebook because I trust her. And I had a constituent make fun of me for my spelling, and Sheena went and corrected it, which is great. So I'm really bad at spelling, but what that means is I can't be trusted to review any mail pieces, any email, blog posts, social media. So your weaknesses could be something as small as you're just bad at spelling. So what are some of your weaknesses you have? Feel free to share in the chat. What are some other weaknesses you've seen candidates have, and strengths? What are some of the
strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah.
Let's see, other strengths. Some folks are really good at like making asks, right? Some folks, you're pretty good at this, just like being an advocate for what you need, asking for what you need first. You're really good at doing that. And I think it comes from this place of, the worst that can happen is someone can say no, right? So you're really good at doing that. With weaknesses, a big one that I see with a lot of candidates try to like memorize verbatim for speeches, right? And like, let's be honest, none of us really think that way, right? I mean, I certainly haven't memorized any large monologues since college. So really not something that a lot of folks are very good at.
Excellent. And then some of the strengths from the chat are, you enjoy public speaking. Fantastic, because you will be doing a lot of that.
That's a good one.
And that you are good at getting people on board with your ideas. That is fantastic.
That's another good one.
And so then you have your strengths, but then it's, what do you love to do? So the way I think of this is, when you wake up and you show up at the campaign office, what's the first thing you actually want to do? Because we tend to keep what we don't want to do until later, right? And so I talked about how I love door knocking, I like public speaking, I really like working with my organizers. So think about what you love to do, what do you do first in the morning, what gives you energy instead of taking energy from you. Mm-hmm. What's some of the things you love to do on a campaign?
I love interacting face-to-face with people. And this was something that we actually connected with early on. We both, like, when we are able to get face-to-face with folks, that's where we shine, right? me as a campaign manager being able to communicate progress for the campaign, you as a candidate. Anytime, I've never once seen Faith on the doors. Like, she'll get folks that answer and be like, well, like, I don't know about this, or right, folks who aren't necessarily on board right away. And like after a 3-minute conversation with Faith, like they become her biggest advocates. So like being able to have those face-to-face conversations is definitely something that we both love. And I think we also had like the same on what we don't like, right? Which is the other side of that coin. Like, we don't really like spending a lot of time on the phone, which could present some challenges for a campaign, especially during call time. But we were able to work through that.
Yeah. And then what we have in the chat going on weaknesses was around fundraising, asking for money, which go check out our fundraising webinars. We also have a lot of fundraising trainers and coaches that can help you with that. And then some of the things that people love to do is I love to talk, connect people with resources, and brainstorm solutions. So that is fantastic. And then what do you not like to do? This is really important to think about, because when you're building your team, you need to fit into all this reality. I'm awful at data. The voter activation network is so important, and I don't really know how to work it very well. I don't like data. I don't like doing data entry. I don't like looking at data. I don't like doing that analysis. So that's why no, I don't like to do.
And like, that's my wheelhouse. So when you talk about the first thing that someone does in the morning when they get up, I would get up, and even before I would go into the office, the first thing that I would do is pull up all of our metrics and start digging through the data, because that's the world that I love to be in.
Yeah. And then obviously a lot of things that people don't like to do is ask for money.
Mm-hmm.
Have you worked with a candidate that didn't have that on their not like to do list?
It's always been like some form, either like the ask itself or like the amount of time that's spent. Senator Elizabeth Warren, for example, hates being in call time. And that's actually something that she's not doing right now with her presidential campaign.
Yeah. Yes, excellent. So know that it's normal, right? Even the best, most rock star fundraisers out there, we raised $455,000 for our state Senate race together. You did it. We have a question online about working through reluctance on call time, but I'm going to save that question for when we talk about our relationship more and how to hire a campaign manager. And so we're talking about what we don't like to do. And now, what networks are in your base is something else to assess. My background is working for environmental nonprofits and nonprofits related to women's rights and organizations. So my base are environmentalists and pro-choice women. Those are the people that are willing to show up, do anything for me. So think about who's in your base. And maybe you haven't done a lot of politics, but you have a really strong relationship at the PTA at your kid's school. Or maybe you're this incredible dentist that helps other dentists open up a bunch of other dentist office, and your base is dentist, right? All these bases are valid and count. So who is your base? What are some bases you've seen other candidates come to the campaign with?
Obviously, we have our like political party aligned bases, right? Like progressive groups, like Democratic Party structures, if candidates have been involved in the like partisan political system, that's a base that folks can come along with as well. The LGBTQ community, Spanish-speaking communities, workers, labor unions are another network that we typically see a lot of folks coming in with. The kind of first circle tends to be kind of the world that the candidate works in, right? So for example, like Faith coming from working in the environmental world, like that's one of her core constituencies for her base that she brought along with her.
Yep. And then next we want you to write down what are some gaps in your networks, right? So for example, I come from nonprofit world. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a nurse. I don't have relationships with the business community. So that's a gap in my network. I haven't done a lot of work with seniors in my career. I didn't work a lot on those policies. I haven't professionally worked with them. So 2 examples of gaps that I had in my network were businesses and seniors. So think about, where are the gaps in your network? And so the reason we start with our self-assessment is you want to create your kitchen cabinet to fill in around you, right? So if you really like knocking on doors, or you really like setting up events, you don't want to fill your kitchen cabinet with a bunch of people that like knocking on doors and setting up events, right? So for example, I know I need data people in my kitchen cabinet. I need proofreaders in my kitchen cabinet. I need some seniors in my kitchen cabinet, based on my self-assessment. So go ahead and share in your chats some of the people or types of people or groups of people that you would be recruiting to be in your kitchen cabinet based on your self-assessment. And Sheena, a lot of times we use the word kitchen cabinet and don't actually talk about what it is. Could you talk about what a kitchen cabinet is and how it takes on different forms based on the candidate?
Absolutely. I remember the first time I heard a potential candidate talking about putting together their kitchen cabinet. And I remember thinking, why are they remodeling their kitchen when they're getting ready to run for office? Putting together a kitchen cabinet, this is a group. We call it a kitchen cabinet because these meetings tend to take place around the kitchen table of the candidate that's running for office. This is a group of folks, usually volunteers, who come together to help fill in those gaps, bring their expertise to help provide the most all-around diverse and inclusive viewpoint for the campaign.
Yeah. And it really is kitchen cabinet because most campaign work happens around a kitchen table, especially when you start. So in 2007, I was running my first campaign, and my kitchen cabinet was basically my dad, my husband, my best friend, and these 2 women that I met at Pro-Choice Lobby Day. And I basically made them come to my first meeting and said, well, clearly you live in my district and you love me and we share values. Those women are both super good, my best friends right now. So I met my best friends by making them join my kitchen cabinet back in 2007. But it really was just some folks that I met and my family and my friends. So it can be high-powered people. It can be really experienced people. And you probably want a little bit of mixture of both. And then for the chat, when you are chatting so that everyone can see it, make sure that you're not just sharing with Star, but you're sharing with all participants and panelists. And go ahead and share some of the folks that you are looking at incorporating into your kitchen cabinet. Go to the next slide. We kind of just did that slide.
We did just kind of do this.
We did that without the nice visual, so we won't do it again.
Without the visual of the kitchen cabinet. One of the key things a lot of folks ask is like, where do I start in looking at like who to ask, right, to be part of the kitchen cabinet. And these are going to be folks that in addition to, bringing different expertise, skill sets, viewpoints to the table, these are also folks who are going to like support you in your candidacy, in your campaign. These are folks that are invested in the shared vision that you as a candidate are going to put forth for this office.
Yep. Excellent. And from the chat, some of the things we're getting are that your cabinet needs a treasurer. Yes, people that are good at numbers and reporting, so important. Webmaster, absolutely. And some graphic designers. I think those are great gaps that you all identified that you could fill in with your kitchen cabinet. And then I would say there are probably some people that think they have to be on your kitchen cabinet, right? They are politically involved in your community. They're influencers. And your kitchen cabinet should be people you trust, that you can have those tough conversations with, really let know the campaign. But those influencers, those folks that really think that they have to be in your cabinet, can think they are and be involved in different ways when you still have your circle of trust that's really helping you fill that
In addition to folks that you can trust, they need to be folks that you can trust to be able to tell you no. Or to be able to push back, or ask some of those hard questions instead of just saying yes.
Absolutely. And as candidates, it's really important that you make yourself open and vulnerable to take that feedback from your kitchen cabinet, because it's what's going to help you grow as a candidate. Some other things people are looking in is they live in a really religious community, and that's not their background. So having folks with that insight and those connections is really important. People with communication strategy and event planning. So that all sounds good.
Yeah, good job, y'all. All right. Now let's talk about the thing that is it's a hard conversation for some folks to have. We tend to, just like as humans, as people, we tend to surround ourselves with folks that are like us, right? Folks who look like us, folks who talk like us, folks who sound like us, folks who like work in the same circles. And that's because it's comfortable, right? That's the space that we're comfortable with. It is important to kind of to push yourself there and make sure that you're not just adding folks to the kitchen cabinet that like look like you and think like you. And this is super important. For example, if your cabinet is all white women, you're going to be missing out on some pretty important perspectives, especially those that reflect what's likely to be a diverse constituency that you're looking to represent.
Yep, it's really important. So I want you to look at that list you made of who you're inviting to your kitchen cabinet and ask yourself, does this reflect the diversity of my community? Am I going to actually be getting insights from my community? For me, honestly, the work I've done, I work with probably 98% women on a day-to-day basis, given, look, I train for Vote and Lead, and I train women candidates, and I work in the women's movement. And so for me, it was hard to recruit men to my kitchen cabinet. And that's a really important insight. When on a daily basis, basically the only guy I talk to is my husband. And so I want you to think about who on your kitchen cabinet that's important in your community, views from your community, isn't there, and add that to your list.
And one that often gets overlooked is that like economic class status, right? So making sure that there are folks that come from like all walks of life, right? If you are running, for example, when Faith was running to be state senator in Senate District 24 in Colorado, the economic diversity in the district was rather large. We had portions of the district, family of fours that are struggling to make ends meet on less than $40,000 a month, all the way up to some pretty pricey home areas in the northern part of the district, where families have, different concerns about the issues that they're talking about as a family around their own kitchen tables.
Yep. And so we have a question from how big should your cabinet be? And I think that varies. I think it varies on your personality, your needs, and your capacity. And I kind of look at my kitchen cabinet as being in two tiers. There's probably 4 or 5 people that when we're making really hard strategy calls, or I've had a really bad day, that I would call. And that's my tight, really close kitchen cabinet. But then when I'm looking at my gaps in community influencers, I have kind of a second tier, and they are involved. We give them campaign updates on a weekly basis. We ask for their feedback on a weekly basis. So I don't know. Do you have thoughts on that? That's kind of how I've done it. But
I've approached it in a similar way. I would say that your core kitchen cabinet should be no larger than 6, right? Because these are relationships to manage. So if you end up with like 24 people on a kitchen cabinet, you're actually creating more work for yourself as a candidate or campaign staff, because you have to maintain those relationships. So I would say less than 6. I would say like 4 to 5 is a good target. But as Faith said, there are going to be those experts in different areas that you'll be able to reach out to on a case-by-case basis.
Yep. Awesome. All right. So now everyone wants to know how a kitchen cabinet works. We talked a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say in the beginning of the campaign, they probably play a bigger role than later on in the campaign, right? So when you're starting your campaign, you're establishing your message, your vision, your staff. You probably don't have staff and have a kitchen cabinet first.
Yep.
They're helping you get everything off the ground, from your website to your donation envelopes. And then once you get into the campaign on the day-to-day, it really becomes basically, candidates, all you're doing is 2 things: asking for money and door knocking. Once you have all that messaging established, all that web stuff established, and then you use your cabinet on an as-needed basis, right? Mm-hmm. Did a story come out? Did an event happen? Do we need a messaging shift, right? Did something interesting happen in the race that's going to change strategy? And there's a whole variety of different ways, but we just talked about the importance of diversity on a kitchen cabinet too, right? So you want to make sure you're organizing your cabinet in a way that maybe it is done more in the email to allow working folks to participate outside their work hours, right? You don't want to be including economic diverse folks and only have meetings every Friday at an expensive restaurant, for example, right? And so think about how you're structuring your cabinet that way. How have you seen kitchen cabinet structures work or not work?
Not working. I worked with a candidate who was very prominent in the business community, and the kitchen cabinet was all men, mostly white, and we're all very successful business owners in the community. And it was actually funny that you brought that up as a reference, because I was the, lowly paid campaign staffer at the time, having to go to these like steakhouses for lunch meetings, where like you're not walking out for like less than like $60 for one person at lunch. And it's like, I literally can't afford to sit in on these meetings. So that was a tough conversation to have with the candidate, but a very important one. And thankfully he was open and receptive to it. And what we ended up doing was actually switching that to the business. We switched it to like a business committee for outreach, and we're more intentional in putting together that diverse kitchen cabinet.
Yep. Great. And here's some quick ideas on different things that you should include, but really make it work for your cabinet, your campaign, and your life. You can have weekly meetings or phone calls or emails, text and email chains. I have several text chains of support. I have my kitchen cabinet text chain, and then I have my other women candidate text chain going through the same thing, that I found super valuable. And really take advantage of their expertise. You brought them there for something you don't have, so don't be afraid to ask them for their expertise and be direct, because maybe you see the need, but they don't see that need. Mm-hmm. So be direct in asking them for what they want. All right. Our favorite part, campaign manager.
Yay!
All right, so when candidates always ask me, how do you hire a good campaign manager? And it's different for everyone. I said treat it more like a relationship and less like a job, because what I need out of a campaign manager is probably very different than what most of you or some of you need out of a campaign manager, which is why we started with the self-assessment. And you are going to be spending a lot of time with this person in sometimes very stressful situations. And so you need to treat it as a relationship first, and then a job second. What do you think?
I definitely seen this shift for myself as someone who's been a campaign manager on multiple campaigns. Early on in my career, it was very focused on the the skills, the expertise that I could bring to the table. Once I became like experienced and established as a campaign manager, I noticed that the conversation shifted very quickly to focusing on like how I connected with the candidate. Because at the end of the day, if you end up hiring a campaign manager that you trust, which is super important, that you know, if there's something that we don't know, if there's something that we don't know how to approach or figure out or troubleshoot, you know, ideally they'll say so. But what you need to be able to trust is that, like, no matter what happens, right? I'm like, can I cuss on this?
I already did.
When shit hits, shit is going to hit the fan at one point or another. If there's one thing I can guarantee you on a campaign, it's that at some point something is not going to go according to plan. So, like, you need to know that the person that you're bringing on to be your campaign manager is someone who's going to be able to roll with that, and that's kind of been the big thing that I've looked for.
Yep. And it's important to talk about what are your non-negotiables. What are their non-negotiables, and what type of culture do you want to create? Because ultimately you are partnering to create a culture on your campaign. So for example, when Sheena and I met for the first time, it was at a coffee shop, and she said, what do you want out of this campaign? What's non-negotiable? Mm-hmm. I said, well, I lead with stories. I want to tell stories first. That's really important to me. I want to build relationships with my community and be on the doors and talk to as many people as possible. I have 2 kids, so it has to be a campaign friendly. Family friendly campaign, right? So I want kids around. I want other people to feel free to bring their kids around. It has to be family friendly. I don't work on Sundays. I go hiking because I know that's what keeps me going. And then I asked Sheena what her non-negotiables were.
Yeah, and I loved the Sunday hiking. I kayak on Sundays. It's the one day a week. There's always a lot of moving pieces. Things can get pretty stressful at times. So for me, it was really important to have one day a week that I knew that I could just like step away from my phone, be away from my laptop, and just kind of get like recentered with myself out in nature. Another non-negotiable that we talked about, I was like, look, I don't want to be one of those folks that's like tied to my email all the time. I was like, I can either be like sitting in front of a computer and like responding to emails all day, or I can actually like have that flexibility to like be out moving and be where I need to be in the community. So once we established that, it was pretty easy for us to be like, all right, if that's not going to be the case, if there's something time sensitive, if there's if I need to communicate with you in some way that requires a rapid response, Fate's like, I'm not going to send you an email. I'm going to pick up the phone and call you or send you a text.
Right. And we're going to talk more about campaign culture towards the end, but also deciding together what type of campaign culture you want to create. Because honestly, some campaigns have a really bad culture, and both of us feel super strongly about it. So you'll get those tips. We have, how do you know if you found a good one? I would say 2 things. One, you have systems set up where you're not battling systems every day, right? Things are just moving. You have your systems for communications with you and the rest of your team. You have systems for communications with you. You're meeting your goals of doors and fundraising. But more importantly, I think it's that moment that you can call your campaign manager and ask them to do something, and you trust them. You don't have to micromanage. You don't have to follow up. You just know they're going to do it. If you have that level of trust, then you have the right one. How do you know when you found a good candidate?
How do I know when I found a good candidate? I know that I found a good candidate to work for when they've thought through, is this the right race, the right time? I know that I found the right candidate when we can have those conversations around what we want the like campaign culture to look like, and not just talk about what we want it to look like, but explicitly have a conversation around, so that means we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. It's it might not be the most helpful advice, but when you know, you know. I think we had spent 45 minutes talking to each other at a coffee shop. And it's funny, I tell this story a lot. Folks were like, how did you know? And it was like, we just knew. Faith was like, I feel like I'm supposed to go home and like pretend to think about this and like call you tomorrow, but like, will you? And I remember sitting back and be like, I feel like I'm supposed to go home and pretend to think about this. And yeah, like, let's do it. I don't know. I'm a big believer in trusting your gut. So if your gut is like yelling at you and saying, no, 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 not this person, listen to that gut.
Yeah. And then we're getting a lot of questions about where do you find a campaign manager, right? Is there a database? Is there some magic box full of campaign managers? And it is hard, especially on your first races and races like city council and school board. So one, if you have a relationship with your local party, they often have trainings or pipelines for campaign managers. Also other candidates. And so a lot of other candidates, I mean, a campaign manager is only a temporary position. And so are there campaign managers that another candidate that you respected is now looking for a job? And then we had a question about where do you find a campaign manager when you can't afford to pay them? And that's probably from your personal network. It's going to be, if someone is willing to give you that much time and attention, it's going to be a friend, it's going to be a family member, which is great because my first campaign manager, I paid very little, but she was my best friend. And we worked at an environmental group together. And so we'd go work during the day at the environmental organization being organizers and go home at night and run a campaign, right? And so if it's someone working for free, it's going to be your best, most passionate volunteer, which you probably already have a relationship with. Other places you can find campaign managers. And I'd say the Vote Run Lead Network, because we have a lot of women in our network that not necessarily want to be a candidate or don't want to be a candidate right now, but being a campaign manager is a great way to contribute.
Yes, and in addition to Vote Run Lead, I won't name any by name, but there are dozens of other alumni networks with folks who have experience working on campaigns, reach out to your personal networks, right? Let folks know that you're looking for a campaign manager. And when you do that within your own personal networks, chances are, right, these are folks that know you. They have some idea of your strengths and weaknesses. So they're actually really good leads to find campaign managers that will be a good fit for you. And there are resume banks. Jobs that are left is a place that it's a online Google group that a lot of folks go to post job openings. They probably post like a dozen different job openings a day, covering like campaigns, issues, and nonprofit work. But there are easily half a dozen different job boards like that, in which folks can go and post those job openings.
Yep. And then it says some questions from the chat was, I volunteered on other campaigns, but I've never worked a campaign from start to finish. Do you think that's a prerequisite for running? Nope. Nope, not at all. You learn along the way, and that's why you do your self-assessment. Because maybe in the beginning, and you've worked on parts of the campaign where you were really good at field, but you haven't done the messaging. Well, then you either find someone on your kitchen cabinet or a campaign manager that fills that role, and that's why we start with the self-assessment.
And while there are some pieces of campaigns that are the same for every campaign, right? Like you have to declare, you have to set up like a campaign committee, right? You need to raise money, knock doors, talk to voters, and then win. Every campaign is so different, right? When you take into consideration the candidate themselves, the office that they're running for, the constituency for that district, in which state, is it a special election? Is it a primary general? There's so many different factors that make them all different. As someone who's I've worked as either staff or a consultant on over 50 campaigns in the last 15 years. every single one has been different. So yeah, don't worry about having not seen everything from start to finish.
And I just want to remind everyone that, women tend to think they're not qualified, even when they are. So if you're thinking that, you're probably overqualified. And this is, does a campaign manager need to be experienced if you're running for local office? And no, right? But it goes back to your self-assessment,
Yep.
right? And so, like I said, I've never been good with data, right? Just, can't spell, not good with data. So Sarah, my first campaign manager, who was my fellow organizer, right, best friend, who I paid a very small amount, I made sure she was good at data. And if she wasn't good at data, we sure would have found someone on our kitchen cabinet that could have.
Mm-hmm.
So my second campaign, I had one super volunteer who's great at the van, and she spent a weekend cutting all my turf for the whole campaign, and then we were done. And that's what she did, because my campaign manager at the time wasn't great at van. I wasn't great at van, but we had a rock star volunteer kitchen cabinet member that did that. So it really all stems from that self-assessment you did, and then you build in all the expertise you need through volunteers, your kitchen cabinet, and your campaign manager.
When I came on as Faith's campaign manager, it was the first race that I did in Colorado. So I wasn't familiar with Colorado election law, campaign finance laws, anything specific to Adams County. And again, as a campaign manager, knew that through my self-assessment. And it was one of the first things that I brought up with Faith. And she's like, we've got Noah as our treasurer. He's amazing. He's got this down. We've also got, compliance lawyers that are on the kitchen cabinet. So like, we've got that whole thing.
And so that was us coming together and filling our gap that neither of us had, which is fine. The great thing about campaigns is there's lots of people. And so utilize your people.
Mm-hmm.
And then other staff positions, right? And some of you won't even be hiring a campaign manager or have other staff positions. These can be volunteer positions. They can be kitchen cabinet members. They can be rockstar volunteers. They can be interns. But generally, in a campaign, you need kind of 3 areas of hard work and expertise. It's field, right? Talking to your voters. Fundraising, having the money so you can afford to talk to your voters. And communications, so you know what to say to your voters.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And again, want to reiterate, there's no right or wrong organization for a campaign. So don't sit here and think like, oh my gosh, like I need to find members for a kitchen cabinet. I need to find campaign manager. I need someone to do field, fundraising, communications. Like what? I like to think of this in terms of like, these are the roles that need to be filled. And they don't necessarily need to be paid staff. They don't necessarily need to be different people. For example, you could have some like rock star badass volunteer who has experience in both fundraising and communications. Let's say they do a lot of like event planning. And doing a lot of fundraisers, right? That's someone who can help fill both of those roles. So it doesn't necessarily have to be different people.
Yep. And then some questions that we're getting from is, what data do I need to upkeep? And can I have an out-of-state data manager? You're the data person. I've already acknowledged I'm bad at this, so I'm going to let her answer this.
Yes, you can absolutely have an out-of-state data manager. Absolutely. In addition to an out-of-state data manager, I've seen like out-of-state phone bankers. I've seen out-of-state like postcard writers. I've had out-of-state folks work on like messaging and policy proposals. Especially now in today's world when there are so many different tools available for folks to be able to communicate and work virtually. Yes. And a data manager is an easy one to have out of state.
Yeah. I would say on the out of state, just on comms, make sure there's a local person that reviews it. So for example, in Colorado, we have mountains. They're very pretty. There have been several candidates that get stuff from out of state that has the wrong mountains, like Alaska mountains or Wyoming mountains. We know they're not our mountains. And so make sure on communications, because there's certain vernacular, for example, or maybe they talk about going to the Kroger store, but we call them King Supers here, right, in a speech. And so always have that local person on communications.
Yes. I feel comfortable sharing this one out. So as one of the first hires on Secretary Clinton's presidential campaign in 2015, I was the first staff on the ground in Indiana. And I saw, there's one thing. If you have ever lived in Indiana, you know that folks from Indiana are called Hoosiers. They're not called Indianians. And that was the first email that got sent out from the Clinton campaign, said, hello, Indianians. And it was like, oh, yes, that local context. I think we've seen a number of folks running for office here in Colorado that have used, it's actually like the Seattle skyline.
Yeah.
Is that it with the mountains in the background? What's another one? Working in New Jersey, it's down the shore. It's not going to the beach. So little things like
right?
that. Definitely having that local context is important. I'm sure folks here also have experiences like that, where when you hear it, you know it does. You know you're not from here.
We have a question about how many researchers do you need to provide briefings, and how many of those are good to have? So I will say first, go check out our messaging training at Vote Run Lead. Policy plans don't necessarily win campaigns. Now, it doesn't mean you want to be policy absent, but policy plans don't win campaigns. And honestly, your best feedback on what you should be talking about in policies you're going to get from going door to door. If you're knocking 100 doors a day or 50 doors a day, you're going to know what your constituents are thinking about. And so I think research is probably one of the least important parts of a campaign. Very important for governing, which is different. So not that you don't want policy ideas, but they don't have to be, I mean, Elizabeth Warren's changing the conversation on this a little bit, which we like. Good policy, but.
Yeah. To reiterate what Faith said there, we actually spent the first 3 months, and this is, Faith had served as a House rep overlapping this district for years. But the Senate district was incorporating a lot of new folks that she hadn't been engaged with. So we actually spent the first 3 months asking folks, going and knocking on doors and asking what issues were most important to you and your family. And it was out of that like first round of doors that we were able to affirm most of our assumptions around what folks thought were the most important issues in the district, but also we're able to highlight a couple that weren't on our radar before. So that helped not only identify that for Faith as someone who was looking to represent these folks, but also gave us some direction around where we did need to end up being able to flesh out some policy ideas and talking points. Yeah. I want to go back and grab the what data am I going to need to upkeep? The two big ones are around dollars and voters. So absolutely keep track of every single dollar that is brought in and every single dollar that is spent. Depending on where you are, you'll have different reporting guidelines, but keep track of every single dollar that comes in, where it comes from, who it came from, and where it goes to. When you spend it, how much, and what for. That's going to be super key for keeping you compliant. The other piece is around voters, right? At the end of the day, you end up winning by getting the most number of people to vote for you on election day. So you want to keep track of those conversations, right? If you talk with folks and they're like, yes, absolutely, I'm in, you're my candidate. You want to know that. Why? Because those are then folks that we're going to ask to volunteer. Those are folks that we're going to ask to donate. Those are folks that we're going to ask, in addition to giving their vote, to contribute to the campaign in other ways. When you talk with someone and they're like, there is no world that exists in which I am ever going to vote for you, you probably don't want to spend any more time or resources talking to that person. The large majority of folks are going to be those who are like, there's an election coming up, or like, I need more information, or like, what is the candidate's stance on transportation and infrastructure, and keeping track of those conversations, seeing how folks move closer to being like, yes, you're my candidate, is very important data to keep track of.
All right, so we have about 10 minutes left.
All right.
And a lot of stuff. So
all right,
we're going to start being a little bit faster.
Okay.
All right. So consultants. You can see our faces. And we have a lot of friends who are consultants.
We've been consultants. Yes.
They're generally not worth their money, in all honesty. And so make sure if you are hiring a consultant, it's very clear what they're going to deliver, because what they're going to want to deliver are ideas and not actually ever do anything.
Yes.
The one consultant that I had on all my races is a mail consultant that helps you get your mail out and take your messaging and put it on your mail. You probably don't need more than that, unless you're running for like Congress or Senate or.
I mean, I would even say in a congressional race, you don't necessarily need one. Definitely U.S. Senate. You know, if you're running for president out there, I know one if you will in the future, you will definitely need more consultants.
So be careful with consultants. Make sure clear deliverables, and they usually cost a lot. Okay, but then what you really need a lot of is volunteers. We love volunteers. So the first thing you have to think about is people volunteer for a whole lot of different reasons, and to recruit the volunteers you need, you have to think about what some of those reasons are.
For example, some folks want to volunteer because they support the candidate, right? So a lot of volunteers that we had were folks that knew Faith. These were friends, these were family members. Her dad was like one of her like biggest and most active volunteers. Other folks will be engaged because they see it as their civic duty, right? They see it as their way to be involved in their communities. Other folks do it because they want to be able to say like, hey, like I'm volunteering on this campaign, like I'm doing good work. Some folks do it to, you know, it's a new experience for them. Given our current political climate, we're starting to see more and more folks kind of get involved in politics for the first time ever, and learning to do something new and different.
Yep. And some people just want the pizza or make a friend or build a resume.
Yep.
And so open up all the doors and reasons why people want to volunteer, which is really important. And then once you get them in the door, you have to make sure it's a good experience. And this, I think, is probably what our campaign was absolutely the best at.
Oh, absolutely. I feel very comfortable saying that.
Yeah.
So folks, volunteers will come first for the candidate, right? They'll come because they're excited about the candidate. But whether or not they come back again absolutely depends on the experience that they have while they're there. We had quite a few volunteers end up coming over to Faith's last campaign who had started on other campaigns and had really bad experiences, but they knew how important this election cycle was to be involved and be engaged, and they had heard through the grapevine that volunteers were having really good experiences with us. So absolutely key. This is something that you cannot take for granted.
And our campaign had more volunteers returning, and we hit more doors with volunteers than any other competitive campaign in Colorado, which was really exciting. And so what does that look like? It meant when they came in, they were greeted. They were made to feel comfortable. They, even if they didn't know anyone in the room, they were made to feel immediately like they're part of the team. We provided training. Coming and volunteering on a campaign is scary if you've never door knocked before, right? So we made sure that they had the script they need. We role played with them. We had them role play with each other. So we gave them the training. We sent them out with partners at first if they wanted to. And then we debriefed them when they came back so they could tell us what worked, what was great, the good stories, the bad stories, and relate to them. And then it's really important to have reasonable expectations. So some volunteers we were getting were coming from a campaign that were asked to knock 100 doors. Now, candidates, you can probably get to 100 door shifts, but that's even hard for me when I'm door knocking every day. And so you need to have reasonable expectations, because if they go out with 100 doors and come back with 55, they're going to feel like they failed. Whereas if they come back for 35 doors and they ask for 40 next time, they feel like they won, right? And so make sure that you have reasonable expectations. All right. Okay, this is a key part of Vote Run Lead, and me as an organizer. I believe that we organize power through people, and for both of us, it was really important to run a campaign that wasn't just about November and the election date. It was about building a movement, because I think that we need to build a movement of engaged organizers that want to make a difference in their communities. And obviously, Vote Run Lead wants to recruit more women to run for office. One of the ways I can do that on my campaign is giving women volunteers leadership and experience and have them be the next candidate. Also, a lot of times you call up a campaign, you're like, I want to volunteer, and all they want you to do is knock doors. Because that's the number one thing you need volunteers to do, but there's other things to do. And so what we did as a campaign team is create a leadership ladder. So some people are coming in and they're like, I'm never talking to a voter. That sounds terrifying. So some of the things that they can do is enter data, they can write postcards, they can stamp letters, they can bring in food for the rest of the volunteers, right? Be that caregiver. But then they come in and they see those other volunteers phone banking. It seems fun. You're like, the food was really great. You're making a difference in your campaign. This time you want to try a few calls, right? And some volunteers are just going to stay at the stamping, bringing in food. But a lot more are going to move up. And then you have your rock star volunteer. We had this awesome 16-year-old who was volunteering on our campaign every weekend. She was amazing. And then we're like, you are really good at this. Can you be one of our trainers? The next time we have volunteers coming in. So that gave her an opportunity to build her leadership. We also built the leadership of our staff. So most of your field organizers, their number one job is to knock doors. But we gave them stretch opportunities. So one wanted more fundraising experience, and one wanted more communications, and one wanted to do more event planning. So we made sure that we were building up the leadership of our campaign team as well.
We made sure one of the things that we did early on with our organizers was sit down knowing that there was an end date, right? Knowing there was an election day and there was going to be a day when we didn't have jobs anymore. So sitting down early on and being like, okay, so knowing this, how can we best use the time of this campaign in addition to knocking doors, recruiting volunteers, training them? What are the other things, those stretch opportunities that we can give you that will set you up for success for whatever comes next?
Yep. And that's all part of creating the right campaign culture. So campaigns are hard. You have to talk to as many people as humanly possible in a short amount of time as you can. You have to raise as much money as humanly possible in the shortest amount of time that you can. And that can create a high stress, high demand, high performance environment that doesn't necessarily value people. And that's not how we work. It's not the values. How could I be the person running paid family leave bills and equal pay bills and then treat my volunteers and campaign staff not nice? Mm-hmm. And so we pushed back on people that wanted us to deliver really high goals. So our organizers worked 32 hours a week, got paid $15 an hour, were paid overtime if they went over that. Mm-hmm. We didn't work 90 hours a week. We didn't send volunteers out with $100 turfs. We were reasonable. We talked about leadership. We had a sexual harassment policy. We had paid leave. We had paid sick days. These are not things that happen on a lot of campaigns. No. And remember, I kept talking about how we hit more doors with volunteers. Well, we didn't hit as many doors total as other competitive races, but I guarantee you the conversations our campaign had was so much better quality because they were there, they weren't burned out, they believed in me, they believed in the organizers, they believed in the culture. And remember, how you run your team is a reflection of your values. And so this is something that, frankly, Sheena and I are trying to shake up national conversations on in order to change how campaigns are run and change culture. And when you run the most competitive campaign in the race and do it this way, we're like, no, you can do a big race this way. So if we can do a big race this way, you can do all races this way.
Yep, absolutely.
Anything you want to add?
No, I mean, just really, yeah.
I'll let you do this.
I'll reiterate all the things, all the things. So again, some of the, it's really important to make sure that the campaign reflects the team reflects the campaign, and all of that is centered around the candidate and the values that they carry. So for us, again, having both been in the campaign world, we had both been in positions where we'd have family emergencies and been told, like, tough, like, sorry to hear about that, but you have a job to do. Or, you know, if you're not feeling well, right, you feel like shit, you look like shit, and then it's like, well, you need to come in and still do your job today. I had a friend, one of my closest friends, out in Indiana, working with AFL-CIO, had back surgery, and she needed someone to, like, physically be there to help her those first few days after. And I was like, hey, Faith, I'm going to take a few days off. Like, we can, like, prorate the pain. She's like, no, like, go do what you can virtually. But, you know, having things like, we paid folks $15 an hour, and if they worked over that, we paid them time and a half. Making sure that, you know, again, that we were reflecting like family-friendly spaces. So we had toys in the office, we had coloring books in the office. If it was an adult-only event, like, we made sure that we had, like, childcare opportunities for folks that did have young kids. What were some more, like, I don't know, I think good or bad examples of campaign culture?
I mean, it really is around the numbers, and I think campaigns need to start focusing more on quality. So what were the quality of the conversations at the doors, not just how many doors did you meet, and the quality of the work, instead of just having these absurd numerical goals that no one can meet, because then you feel like it's a waste of time to come in and celebrate your small successes.
Yeah, a lot of I would say where most of that, like, toxic bad campaign culture comes from is this ridiculous idea that if you're not working, you don't care enough, or, like, you're not working hard enough, or, like, you don't believe enough in the campaign. That's bullshit.
You can actually have a life and be passionate about making change, just to be totally clear. And so then a timeline. So we had a question earlier, can you keep building your kitchen cabinet throughout the campaign? Absolutely. Absolutely. So keep building, but start with your kitchen cabinet, hire a campaign manager once you can afford one, and then determine the rest of your hires and structure with your manager. Anything on timeline? I hired her super early, which I was very nervous.
There was a reason for that, though.
I was very nervous about.
So nervous.
But it ended up working really well, and so now I'm a fan.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely going to start with your kitchen cabinet first. So don't think that you have to hire, you know, a campaign manager or, like, someone to help with fundraising before you put your kitchen cabinet together. They can really help with that.
And then, you know, it's a team sport. It's right. You're only as strong as your team, and your team reflects you. Right. And if your team goes out and is negative, that one bad experience will spread like wildfire. And that comes from the top, and the culture comes from the top. And like I said, you're not just winning a campaign, you're building a movement, and treat it like you are. And then, of course, build your team that reflects you and run as you are.
We did have that one question earlier about the reluctance around call time.
Oh, right.
Which I did want to hit on because, as we said, Faith, in addition to basically every other candidate out there, there's some sort of reluctance around call time. It's
not fun. I mean,
so what we did, right? We had that very frank conversation, right? Like, Faith understood that this was a tool in the toolbox, right? But it wasn't the only tool in the toolbox. So going back and relying on her strengths, we focused on having a lot of events. We had several fundraising events, a lot of house parties, and that was where she shined. So we focused call time around that. Also, I mean, we worked smarter, not harder. There were a lot of folks in Faith's phone that, like, she doesn't have conversations with on the phone. They're texting conversations, they're emails, they're messengers through social media apps. So she would use whatever mode of communication she had established with that person. That was how she would reach out to them. So it wasn't always necessarily call time wasn't always necessarily on the phone. It could be text, it could be emails, but we built them out around her strengths, which was those face-to-face interactions with folks and recruiting for events.
Yep. And then we also have some chats about awful and abusive behavior people have experienced on campaigns, which we're sorry, which is why we want to change culture. We want more women to run. We want more young folks, NPOCs, and GLBTQ folks, because we are actually changing the culture of this. I'm sorry for your experience. And then there was a question, can I just start my campaign with a Gmail account? Yes, I still only have a Gmail account, and I run 5 campaigns. I'm not paying for that, but yes. And a lot of these questions around the other parts of the campaign, around fundraising, field, talking to voters, we have trainings for those. Check out all of our trainings at VRL, because you are now a member of the VRL family. You are an alum. You are officially in. Go join the alumni group. We do in-person trainings sometimes, a lot of online trainings. I am the training director. If there is a training you want, you go online and you say, this one's missing, we can fix that. I have a plan for that. So let me know what other trainings you want. Join our family. We are so happy to have you on today. Thank you, Sheena, for being an awesome campaign manager, awesome friend, and joining me.
Thank you so much for asking me. If there are folks whose questions we did not get to, feel free to tweet at us, and I'll definitely be more than happy to answer any of those questions.
Yep, tweet at us or put your question in the alumni group. We will both check the alumni group later today too. Yay,
Awesome. Thanks,
love
y'all.
you all. Bye.
Bye.